I noticed the first hairline crack in a morning that looked like any other. Coffee steamed in the chipped mug my mother loved. My father was sorting the mail into neat rows on the table, and a radio host murmured about weather that would be kind if the afternoon cooperated. I was packing my lunch for work, thinking about a presentation that had not yet learned how to behave, when my father slid a pale envelope toward me with a frown that tried to be casual. It had my name on it, my full name, centered with the dignity of a diploma. Inside was a letter from a hospital 2 states away, thanking me for a recent visit and asking about an unpaid balance. The amount was large enough to make my stomach tilt, and the date was from a week when I had been in my office every day. I laughed, the wrong sound for the room, and said there must be a mix-up. My mother said the postal service makes mistakes all the time, and my father nodded too hard, like a man trying to bounce a thought out of his head. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope as if calm could be a spell. On the way to work, I told myself a plausible story about clerical errors, shared names, a computer that had decided the alphabet could play tricks. By lunch, I had called the hospital to correct the record. A friendly voice confirmed my address, my birth date, and a policy number I had never seen. I said that could not be right. The voice went quiet, then turned cautious. "I will make a note," the voice said, and suggested I speak to my insurer. My insurer had no record. There was a short pause that sounded like someone covering the receiver to breathe. By 3, I had placed a freeze on my credit because adulthood has taught me where the emergency tools live. By 6, I was back at the kitchen table with the envelope lying between us like a polite guest. My mother cooked as if dinner were a test she intended to pass, and my father sorted receipts without looking at me. I wanted to ask and did not want to ask at the same time. The dog pressed her head to my knee in that way animals have when they know the air has changed. After we ate, I mentioned the letter as if it were new again. I said the hospital had my details. I said my insurer had nothing. My mother said it must be a database error. My father said not to worry. His voice had the tone he uses with flat tires, firm and cheerful, as if skills were enough. I cleared the table and felt something clear inside me too. Not anger, not yet, only attention. I opened my laptop and requested my credit reports from all 3 bureaus, a ritual we all perform and then forget. I waited for the downloads while the dishwasher hummed and my parents pretended the humming was pleasant. The first report blinked open and showed 3 credit cards I did not own and a loan for a car I had never seen. The second report agreed. The third one added a store account in a city I had visited once as a child. I stared at the screen until the numbers turned into a pattern, and the pattern turned into a person who had borrowed my life. I closed the laptop. I sat very still. My mother asked if I needed more tea. My father said he would take the trash out. The dog sighed the way old dogs sigh when storms approach for the second time. I took the next day off and turned it into a desk with a purpose. I set a glass of water on the right, a notepad on the left, and I called every number the reports offered. I spoke to a calm woman in a fraud department who told me to file an affidavit. I spoke to a man who sounded like he had said the same script too many times and he told me to place an alert. I made neat notes and underlined the parts that felt like doors. Noon slipped into afternoon, and I realized I had not eaten, and I realized hunger was a distraction I could fix. So I fixed it. When I returned to the table, the house felt fuller, as if the walls were listening. I printed the reports, highlighted accounts I did not recognize, and placed a sticky note on each page with a polite sentence that said, "This is not mine." The hospital called back to ask for a copy of my identification. I sent what they asked for, then sat in the new quiet while my mind did the arithmetic of betrayal without yet using the word. At 4, my mother called to ask if I needed anything from the store. I said I needed time, which was not a grocery item, and she said she would bring milk anyway. When she arrived, she set the bag on the counter with the reverence of an offering. She asked how work had been, and I said I had taken a personal day, and she said that made sense. And then she said nothing at all. My father came home and went straight to the garage, which is where he goes when a feeling is too large to fit through the front door. I followed him with the envelope. I showed him the reports. I spoke in the voice I use when facts are all I can afford. He rubbed the back of his neck and said paperwork gets messy. He said sometimes companies open accounts without real permission. He said the world is full of mistakes. I asked if someone had used my information. He did not answer. He said he was hungry. We ate dinner without tasting the food. After dishes, I walked the dog and listed the knowns. False accounts, a hospital bill, a charger behind a plant. I stopped. The charger belonged to another story, another season. I pulled myself back to this present room and this present problem. In the hallway, the mirror reflected a face I recognized and did not want to pity. I told my reflection that I would move with care. I told my reflection that sometimes love carries a heavy mask. The house went to sleep. I did not. I sat with the reports until the numbers turned back into numbers and not ghosts. In the morning, I would ask again. I decided to hold my voice steady until someone else could not. I chose Saturday morning because the light is kinder and my mother makes pancakes on Saturdays as if sugar can persuade the weak to behave. I set the printed reports in a stack, placed the hospital letter on top, and brought everything to the kitchen table without ceremony. My mother flipped pancakes and hummed the same song she hums when she wants to keep a room gentle. My father read the headlines and made small noises of disapproval, which is his sport. I waited until the first plate was on the table, and then I placed the stack beside it and said I needed to talk about these. I did not use heat. I used nouns and verbs. I said there are accounts in my name that I did not open. I said there is a hospital bill for a visit I did not make. I said someone had enough of my information to make these things seem real. My mother sat down without the syrup, which she never does, and stared at the papers like they might read themselves. My father put on his glasses and took the top page, then put it down as if it had a temperature. His face softened and then hardened. He said, "We can fix this," and his voice broke on the we. My mother said sometimes families do things that families need to do. I asked what that meant. She folded the dish towel and unfolded it. She said when the market turned and the plant closed and the mortgage went strange, they used the numbers that were available. She said it was temporary. She said they meant to tell me when the ship had steadied. She did not say my name. My father said the car loan had been for his commute when the old car refused to live. He said he could not get approved because his credit had been hit by a medical bill from his own surgery. He said the cards were to keep the lights on. I listened and felt my chest do that strange two-part thing that grief teaches. Pain, then pity. Pity, then pain. I asked when, and he said last year, and my mother said earlier than that. I asked how, and my mother said the forms were simple and the clerk did not ask many questions. I asked why they did not ask me, and my mother said she did not want me to look at them the way I was looking at them now. My father said he thought he could be the kind of man who fixes rather than asks. I put my hands flat on the table so they would not fly. I said you took my name and built a bridge without asking me if I knew how to swim. My mother said families share, and I said sharing requires consent. My father asked if I would call it even if he paid everything now. I said even is not a number we can reach with money alone. The dog lay on my feet and trembled because dogs do not like it when voices change shape. We spoke for an hour without moving. I did not raise my voice. I did not soften my words. I said I would file the affidavits. I said I would dispute the accounts. I said they would need to sign statements. My mother cried and said I was making us criminals. I said the facts were not improved by softer names. My father asked if I would ruin them. I said I would protect myself. And I said I would not write the ending alone. The pancakes went cold. The room learned a new kind of quiet. We met with a mediator on Tuesday because I did not want our living room to become the only place where truth was allowed. The office had plants that were better watered than the ones in our kitchen, and a window that made the city look calm. The mediator introduced himself with the cadence of a person who has learned how to muffle the harsh parts of his job. He asked us to describe the situation in simple terms. I told him my identity had been used to open accounts without my permission. I told him the people who used it were sitting beside me. My mother flinched at the word used. My father stared at the carpet, where a pattern pretended to be a path. The mediator asked my parents to speak. My mother explained about the plant closure, the mortgage, the slip that turned into a slide. She said they had thought they were borrowing time. My father added numbers that made sense and numbers that did not. The mediator asked me what I needed. I listed the concrete tasks because these were the handholds. Signed affidavits for each fraudulent account. A written admission for the hospital that the visit was not mine. A plan for repayment of any costs I would incur, including any interest that had already made itself at home in my reports. Removal of my details from any files they kept. The mediator nodded as if the heir had agreed. He asked my parents what they could accept. My mother said she would sign, but she would not call herself a thief. My father said he would sign and he would pay and he would take whatever word the paper used. The mediator asked me about criminal charges. I said I did not want my parents in court. I said I wanted my name back. The mediator wrote on a pad. He suggested an apology. My mother said she had said sorry 3 times and that would have to do. My father looked at me and said he was sorry in a way that sounded like he had been waiting for this sentence all his life. We signed papers with a pen that felt heavier than it looked. After, the mediator gave me a packet with steps to follow. He told me that betrayal by family is a special sort of knot. He did not say it with pity. He said it with knowledge. We left the office and stood on the sidewalk like 3 people who had found the same map and liked different routes. My mother asked if I would come for Sunday dinner. I said not this week. My father asked if I would let him know when the hospital cleared my name. I said yes. At home I scanned the signed forms and uploaded them to everyone who needed to see them. I made copies and placed them in a folder because paper can be a kind of armor. I wrote an email to my supervisor asking for a flexible morning, and she replied with permission and a link to a resource for employees dealing with identity theft. I cried at my desk for 4 minutes and then I made tea and opened the next form because this was how I would stay whole. I slept and did not dream. In the morning, I woke up feeling like a new person had moved into my body and wanted to be careful with the furniture. The weeks that followed were filled with tasks that did not care about feelings. I filed police reports because the hospital had advised it, and because sometimes the form you do not want to file is the form that keeps the rest of the forms in line. I mailed copies to credit bureaus with tracking numbers because I am a person who likes proof. I called each bank and repeated the story until the edges smoothed and the shape stayed the same. Fraud alert. Identity theft affidavit. Copy of my identification. Copy of the signed statements. Repeat. At work, I did my job well enough that no one asked if I was unraveling. After work, I became a clerk of my own repair. Noor came over with soup and a practical air. She helped me build a binder with tabs. She told me to eat when I forgot. She told me to stand in the sun for 10 minutes a day. I did both. My mother sent messages that were part apology and part complaint. She said neighbors had opinions. She said family would talk. I said let them. My father sent updates on the payments he had made to close the accounts. He sent screenshots like a student proving he had done the homework. I thanked him as if gratitude could be an honest currency again. I went to a counselor who specialized in families that borrow from one another without consent. We talked about unsaid rules that had lived in our house for years. We talked about the way children hand over their trust like a wallet. We talked about how to reclaim a name without setting the house on fire. I learned to name the feelings without putting them in charge. Anger, sadness, pity, love, fear, relief when a letter arrived stating that an account had been removed, rage when a collector called anyway and asked for me, and I had to say again that the name did not mean the debt. The hospital sent a final letter that called me not responsible. I framed it in my head and then put it in the binder because victory belongs beside the rest of the record. I met my parents for coffee in a public place where the chairs scraped just enough to keep people honest. My mother talked about her new part-time job at the library. My father talked about walking the dog. We did not talk about money. We did not talk about the day in the mediator's office. We talked about a recipe for a soup that might forgive a week. I went home and slept a sleep that did not rehearse arguments. Slowly, my reports began to look like mine again. Slowly, the binder felt less like a shield and more like a history book that could be placed on a shelf. When my mother called to ask for help with a small bill, I said I could give a gift of a specific amount and not a loan. I used the sentence without apology. She accepted without adding interest that had only ever been made of guilt. My father asked if I needed anything for my car. I said I needed the oil changed and he said he would show me how. And we stood in the driveway like people who were learning how to be careful with each other in new ways. I do not pretend that the ending is a clean line. It is a series of small choices that add up to a new shape. I keep the binder in a safe place, not because I want to look at it, but because it reminds me that I can build a record that protects me when memory tries to be kind at the wrong time. I keep my credit frozen as a default, and unfreeze it only for the hours I need. I check my reports on the first day of each new season the way other people check smoke alarms. I learned that trust is not a gate you either open or close. Trust is a hinge you oil and a door you replace when someone has leaned on it too hard. My relationship with my parents has become a path that curves around the old sinkhole. We meet for lunch, we talk about work and weather, and sometimes my mother remembers a story about when I was small and makes the mistake of using it as evidence that we are the same as we were. I let the story live and I do not let it argue. My father brings the dog to the park near my apartment and we walk without discussing anything that requires signatures. On holidays, I arrive and leave at times I choose. When someone tries to make a joke about my binder, I make a joke about their receipts and we both smile in the slightly stiff way that people do when they are still learning. The most unexpected part of the betrayal was not the accounts or the hospital bill. It was discovering how quickly love can make a story that sounds noble out of actions that were not. The most unexpected part of the repair was discovering that I could hold both truths at once. My parents were desperate, and they were wrong. I was hurt, and I would not let hurt be the architect of my future. I keep a small card in my wallet that says my name belongs to me. It is not necessary, and it is entirely necessary. On a quiet Saturday, I stood at the kitchen counter and made pancakes for myself. I ate the first one as if it were a ceremony for a language I now speak. Flour, sugar, milk, heat, attention. Simple does not mean easy. My phone buzzed with a picture from my father of the dog asleep in a puddle of Sunday. My mother sent a line from a book she was shelving that morning. She said forgiveness is the opposite of forgetting. I put the card back in my wallet and texted back a heart, and then I opened the window and let the room breathe.